Welcome back to part 2 of my questions and answers. I'm answering the questions that most of you have been asking me over in the Ravelry group, and I have kind of sectioned them up into more knitting and less knitting related questions. So part 1 has been very much about all the knitting, all the yarn, and part 2 is going to start off with that as well, but I'm also going to be talking about some less knitting related things like travel and my relationship and just everything that you guys wanted to know. So if you're coming back, thank you so much, and if you're watching this first, maybe watch my first video and then come back to this, but it's up to you. You can do whatever you want. I'm reading the questions off my computer, so sorry if I'm looking over there. I'm up to question number 29, which is, what is your favorite go-to color and what colors are out of your comfort zone? So if you've been watching the podcast, you know what kind of colors are in my comfort zone. You can see what I'm wearing, these kind of colors. These are some recent acquisitions. I love my grays and my pinks and purples and mauve, and these are definitely very much my shades of preference. I also have lately been on a grello kick, so like a mustard yellow combined with like black and white. That really tickles my fancy at the moment. And also I've been drawn more and more into like blues and teals and navies. But a lot of times I do like the cool colors. Even though I think as I'm progressing as a knitter, I am falling in love with different colors as well. So for example, a color that would be out of my comfort zone right now is this. This is just a small ball which I'm using for a blanket, but it's this super rich green, and now that I'm looking at it, it would be an amazing garment, but this is like the greens and the oranges and stuff are not naturally in my comfort zone. Even though, I don't know, I'm very pale, but with my dark hair I could probably wear those like warmer colors as well. I just don't really gravitate towards them. Show us your UFOs. Do you have any UFOs? And if you don't know, UFO stands for unfinished objects. So I would interpret these as, you know, projects that have been lingering and hibernating and not been finished for months or years. And I only have one. And I brought it over to show you guys because you can see it, and then gasp, I will forget. I have pulled this out quite a while ago from a pretty bag where I had just left it to rot. This is a shawl by Sylvia McFadden. I think she was most famous for her Waiting for Rain shawl, and this was a different one but with the same concept where you have like lace short rows and garter stitch. And this is using a very special yarn that I got from a friend and viewer years ago. This was an alpaca lace that she said she didn't enjoy, so she sent it to me. And I think part of me just really wanted to work with her yarn. So I cast this on about 1.5 years ago on a holiday in France, but using this lace weight alpaca yarn, it's not really bringing me joy. So this is my only one project, besides another one that I've dumped on a friend to finish. Sorry, Marion. But I'm going to rip this out today. I just have been too lazy to do it, and then I need to figure out what to do with the yarn. And that's it, you guys, that's it. Unless I'm forgetting something, but I don't think so. I mean, I guess you could call my blankets UFOs, but I am still planning to finish those, and I do work on them every now and then, so I don't really count them towards that sort of project category. Have you participated in any mystery knit-alongs, and if so, do you wait to finish each clue and keep it a surprise, or do you like spoilers instead? So I think I've only done 3 mystery knit-alongs. The first one I did was one of Stephen West's, and I did that as a surprise, so I literally just knit the clues as they came out and tried to knit so fast that I couldn't see any spoilers before I finished. And since then, I've been more careful with one exception. Especially with like Stephen West patterns, I love them, but I feel like sometimes I need a bit more pre-planning because I don't want to spend a lot of money and yarn and time knitting a surprise mystery knit along and then at the end think I should have maybe swapped around the colors. You know what I mean? So by now, I tend when I see mystery knit alongs come and pop up, I tend to watch everyone else do them first and then decide if I want to join in. The only exception is I did the mystery mittens by Ellie of Skandia this year for her Christmas mittens, the Yule nut, which sadly I failed because my gauge was just too off, so I ripped them out. But so I'm kind of neither here nor there. There are some designers like Ellie, or maybe even I think if Hohi Locatelli did another mystery knit along, and it didn't use 8 skeins or something insane. I would join in for the mystery, but sometimes I also like to just see a spoiler first and see if I like the idea in which it is going. So I kind of do both. Is there knitting techniques that don't really interest you? I've already answered that. Do you prefer sweaters or cardigans? So I'm assuming sweaters is like the closed front like this, and cardigans are either open front cardigans or they have buttons or they have a zip or anything like that. And if you had asked me that years ago, I would have said cardigans, but today I'm going to say sweaters. First of all, I prefer knitting sweaters, and I think sweaters are easier to knit. Because with cardigans, sometimes you have great fitting cardigans, and sometimes the fronts are kind of too far apart, or they hang open, or they hang kind of weird at the top. So I feel like with cardigans, it's a little bit more iffy to get them to fit just right. Also, I don't like sewing on buttons. Not to say I hate sewing on buttons. And yeah, I used to think that I would overheat with sweaters, but I really don't. And I have so many sweaters. I have very light sweaters, such as this one, which is the branches and buds. And I have very heavy sweaters, and I don't overheat in them. I love them, and I think that sweaters are a little bit more forgiving in fit. If you don't have the perfect gauge or the design isn't just 100% molded to your body shape, I think sweaters are easier to modify, and I really like them. Now we're kind of moving into travel knitting and travel and less knitting related stuff. So the first question is by someone who has been following me on Instagram and knows that I do quite a bit of train knitting because I do take train journeys for work. And they asked, I was wondering if you are getting comments on your train knitting. Have you experienced inappropriate comments? If so, how have you reacted to those? So generally, I knit in public, but I'm not constantly knitting in public. So I know that people here in Munich, they knit on the underground and they knit on the bus. I don't really do that because I need peace and quiet to knit. So for me, on like a 15-minute journey, I'm just too lazy to get out my knitting. But I do knit on my hour-long train journeys. And yes, I do get lots of comments on it. I think if you knit in public, you have gotten the same. Most people are really, really just friendly and interested in it. I've knit on a train in Paris, in the south of France as well. I'm wondering if I have knit when I was back in Southeast Asia. I think I have. So when you're traveling, like everyone will comment on it. I've had conversations about my knitting in French, which is always very, very interesting. And I usually don't mind it, but when people start talking to me about my knitting, I obviously don't get very much knitting done. So on train journeys, especially after work, when I'm tired, what I will do is I will have my headphones on, and most of the time people will get that I don't maybe want to talk to them about my knitting. So I know that people aren't being rude, or they're just generally interested, and that's really nice actually. I really like that aspect, but sometimes I just can't hear another story from someone whose grandma used to knit them socks. Like, I'm sure you know what I mean. So in terms of rude comments, I haven't really gotten any really rude comments so far, and I'm very grateful because I don't know how I would react to it. Like I said, I try not to push my knitting into anyone's face, so I only have very small projects with me, and I like knitting to be a solitary thing most of the time. So I just kind of zone out, and yeah. But it is really nice, I will be fair. The other day I was sitting on the train next to a girl who was maybe about 20, and she was really interested, and she thought it was so cool that like young people are knitting now, and I mean that's really awesome. So I do like that aspect of it, but I don't go out knitting in public to promote knitting. Does that make any sense? I feel like I'm not answering any of your questions. Anyways, what is your favorite travel knitting projects? Definitely socks. I love knitting socks because they don't take much space. I know that some people, they take sweaters and shawls and everything on the train. But when I travel, I usually like to travel very light. And when I travel for work, I only have a small bag and I just shove one or two one skein sock projects in there, and that is just the easiest. So very, very rarely have I knit anything but socks on travel knitting. When I go on holidays, I will take some bigger projects because I don't want to just be working on socks for 2 weeks. But then again, I will try to maybe take projects that don't take very much yarn. So for example, for our honeymoon knitting, what I'm planning on taking is like things like Holzgarten, where I only need 4 little cakes to make a sweater. So I'm not going to be lugging around a DK or Aran weight sweater quantity of yarn, because for me personally, that would just stress me out. And now we get to a couple of questions that people have been asking about my travels. So I will just read them out and then try to answer them all in one. One person asked, you seem to like traveling in Asia. What makes it so interesting for you? Other people asked, what are the places that you have traveled to? You have mentioned some in the past. Are there places you are hoping to visit? And another person said, I know you love France, but what are some other countries you and Kai would like to travel to? And do you have any interest in traveling to America, to any of the Fibre Festivals? So yes, I have traveled a lot in the past. I've always enjoyed travel. I think I did my first sort of solo travel when I was 14, and I didn't want to spend the holiday with my family, and so I asked if I could go to England and learn English. So they sent me to England, to Eastbourne in the south of England for about 4 weeks, and I came back and I was like, hey, Mom, Dad, that was great. Can I now please go to Australia for a year? And my parents pretty much dropped dead, and they were not very excited about that. And I just wanted to go abroad and be living abroad and going to school in a different country. So it's always been an interest of mine. Long story short, my parents, after, oh my gosh, I spent so much time talking to them and convincing them and telling them about all the benefits that you get as a young person when you travel abroad and you learn another language, and such it just went on forever. And in the end, I was allowed to be an exchange student in Australia. And my parents only wanted me to go for 5 months, but I plotted to go for a year, and I ended up staying for almost a year. My poor parents, you know. But I had 2 little sisters, so they kept them busy. So that also answers another question, which is going to come up later, which is how I learned my English. I wouldn't say that I perfected my English, because I frankly don't think my English is that great. But yes, I spent a year in Australia when I was 15. Subsequently, of course, as you do, had a boyfriend over there for 4 or 5 years. So I have since then just been working on keeping up with my English, even though that relationship eventually failed. But that is to say that I've always enjoyed traveling. And when I was a university student, that kind of just went on. So I have always been interested in like social activities and social causes. So in my first semester of studying psychology, I decided to go to Vietnam to teach English. And subsequently, I also have worked in social care in north of Thailand. And I used these sort of like social work trips to then also travel and get to know the country. And Southeast Asia just proved to be a good place to do that because it is quite safe. You can travel alone as a woman. It's affordable, which not all places to travel are. So that's where my love of Southeast Asia somehow just came into play. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I've been to Vietnam, to Thailand, to Malaysia. I did a backpacking trip for 7 weeks through Indonesia and Malaysia, which that was intense. I think I lived on about like $20 or $25 a day, including like everything, and slept in rooms with like 10, 15 other people. So I was definitely doing the proper backpacking, which was fun. And since meeting Kai, we did some traveling together, even though he likes to travel with a bit more comfort. And by now I do too. But that is how the whole Southeast Asia thing happened, and I did that for a couple of years. I would work in a cafe and save up all my money and then book a flight to Thailand or whatever and just spend it and just enjoy it. I also have always enjoyed learning languages. So I learned a little bit of Vietnamese when I was working there as an English teacher, which came in quite handy. A tiny bit of Thai. I just love picking up languages. And then when I started working full-time, obviously you don't have that much time anymore to just go to Asia for like 4 weeks at a time. So that's when we started traveling more within Europe. Kai and I, we both love France. Again, I speak French, but not too great. But a dream of mine, which I just haven't gotten around to, was I always wanted to just go and live in France for half a year and perfect my French. Never got the time. It's probably not going to happen now, but by going there on holiday, at least I can kind of work on it, and I actually work for a French company. So again, it just makes sense to practice that language. But I also love French food, and I love the French people in general. So that's why lately our trips have been more confined to within Europe or within, closer distances. I went to Norway with my friend last year, which was amazing. Kai actually studied in Sweden, so we've both been traveling before we met each other. And I definitely want to go to Sweden with him and just experience that. In terms of going to America for a Fibre Festival or just in general, I've always been interested in going to the US, but it just never happened, and there are always reasons that make it difficult. So sadly, it's not on our current plans right now. We both would really like to go to Canada first, or maybe do I would like to do a road trip within Canada, or maybe like the west coast of the States. I think that would be really, really cool. But Kai isn't really buying into that idea yet, and yeah, there's just so many weeks you can take off a year, and so it's not something that we're planning to do immediately. In terms of going specifically to attend Rhinebeck or like another Fibre Festival, I'm not planning on it. I think these festivals, they seem amazing, but I think I would just be overwhelmed, and it is just a very, very expensive way to buy yarn. So if I could just snip my fingers and could be there if I had more time, totally. But right now, like in the foreseeable future, I don't think that's going to happen. Sadly. Which kind of leads into the next question, which is, what would be your dream yarn-related festival to attend? When there, would you buy all the yarn or only for certain projects? Would you mainly purchase superwash or rustic wool? And in that vein, 2 festivals that I would really, really like to go to is EYF, Edinburgh Yarn Festival, which is happening, I think, in 2 weeks. And I couldn't go this year because I'm getting married the week later. And the other one is the one of the Norwegian ones, either Bergen Fibre Festival or Oslo Fibre Festival. These are the ones that really, really interest me, and I think they are the ones that have the yarn that I would really, really enjoy. So when there, would I buy all the yarn or only for certain projects? I mean, you know me, I would buy it all. I would really buy it all. Would you mainly purchase superwash or rustic wool? I tend to like the more rustic wool. So I would rather spend like £30 on a sweaters quantity of rustic sheepy yarn than spend it on a single skein of merino singles, but I don't really know. That is just a tendency, and I feel like the fiber festivals that I just named would have good rustic wools as well. Um, Especially EYF, I would love to go and get all the blacker yarns because they look amazing. I think I would love blacker. And there are just so many smaller like mills and stuff that I would be interested in. So those are things that I'm thinking about, or maybe at some point I can go to like a festival like Unravel, like one of those UK ones that are relatively easy to go to. I just haven't managed to do that so far. Next up, these questions are not knitting related anymore. Someone asked, how have you perfected your English? And I think I talked about that quite a bit, obviously by living in Australia and then coming back to work there and just always having been a language person, that kind of helped. Someone asked, does Kai, who is my fiance, have a favorite hobby too? How does he occupy his time, especially when you're on vacation, when you're knitting? And that used to be a bit of an issue because, I mean, lots of people, they don't have any sort of hobbies where you make anything. So he would be watching TV and I would be knitting and watching TV. But Kai has been, he's actually an online gaming streamer, which is really fun. He only started that about, I don't know, 9 months ago. So he's quite busy doing that and building his fan base over there. He generally likes computer things and playing StarCraft 2 and all of that. So he's quite happy when at night, for example, he's like, do we have to do something together or are you happy to just knit? And I'm like, I'm perfectly happy to just knit and listen to my boring knitting podcasts, and he will go and play on his computer and be perfectly happy as well. And yes, I think that's a great relationship. My mom doesn't agree. Kai also does a lot of sports, which is amazing. He recently started jiu-jitsu, which is like a self-defense sport, I guess. He also does freeletics, he plays tennis, and he's very active, so that also works out really well. When we're on vacation, he just tends to, I don't know, read a book and I knit. And obviously, when we're on vacation, I do knit a lot, but it's not like we don't do stuff because I have to knit. So I definitely try to keep my hobby at bay as well. I think the hardest part for him is going to all the yarn shops, so I try to keep that to a minimum because I have a lot of yarn, and when we go to yarn shops, for example, we went to La Bien-Aimée when we went to Paris. I try to make it easy for him because I don't want to go to Paris and then spend one day dragging him around to places he doesn't want to go to. So in this case, I fed him with French food, then dropped him at the yarn store. It's like, I'm going to take 20 minutes, just sit there, enjoy yourself, and I will try to be fast because obviously it's his holiday too, and I don't want to intrude on his time that much because I think he is a great yarny boyfriend slash husband. And that is actually leading perfectly into my last question, which is, how did you meet Kai and how did you know that he was the one? And that's actually really funny because you guys have asked me a lot of questions, some of which I haven't answered, but no one actually ever asked that in the almost 3 or 4 years that I've podcasted. And it's a funny question. It's a bit embarrassing, but we actually met through like online dating. It's really hilarious. This was back when like the dating apps on the phones just kind of came up, or at least it seemed that way to me. We were both living in the same city, and it turns out that one of his work colleagues was actually studying with me, and like we have all these people that we both know. So, but we never met each other. So we met each other through an online app, and Kai asked me to go get some coffee, and I mean, coffee. Perfect move right there, Kai. So we went out for coffee. I had a double espresso and was super, super caffeinated and very, very bubbly. And it was really funny because I used to think he was kind of like too businessy. Like, it's hard to describe, but back then I was a university student walking around with like my dorky hipster bags, and you know how it goes. And he was obviously, back then he had his own firm, and I kind of thought he was like a business guy. And I was actually talking to my best friend at the time, like, I like him, but he's so businessy, and I don't know. And it turned out that was really not the case at all. And yeah, then things happened very quickly. I think we moved in together after 2.5 months, which is insane. I don't know why I did that, but it worked out. And now we've been together for almost 5 years, and we're getting married. We may actually be married by the time you watch this. And he is a great yearny, knitworthy person, and yeah, I'm really happy with that. And I know he's the one because he puts up with all of my crazy and all of the yarn, so I think that kind of sealed the deal. All right, now I have been waffling on, and I'm not sure if anything that I said made any sense, but it's your fault because you asked, and because if you're still watching this, you chose to listen to it. So thank you so much for watching. I will be back very soon with a proper knitting episode, and until then, I hope you have a great time, have fun with your knitting, and I will see you very soon. Bye-bye!